Good evening and welcome to Tiriam Talk Show. The demolition of the Lai Chi-Wun abandoned shipyards in Kolowan has been suspended. Authorities will now conduct an assessment to determine whether to list the area as a historical site. The controversy has been making headlines over the past few years, with authorities and citizens weighing on issues related to public safety and conservation. Our guest has been playing an active role as a spokesperson for the local community there. David Marques is the president of the Lai Chi-Wun Villagers Association. David Marques, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
What's so special about the Lai Chi-Wun village?
Lai Chi-Wun village, think about it as a way of life that we all used to share in Macau.
Isn't it a window into the lost soul of Macau to some extent?
I would say it's a window to the soul of Macau because it's still very much
there.
Existing. You can feel it when you walk there. It's a completely different landscape. Everything is done by hand. People use their sweat and their energy to make the place happen.
We're talking about 10 to 15 families still living there, right?
Correct, so far, yes.
And tell us about the daily life.
The daily life involves waking up, saying to the good morning next door. You actually see a face-to-face connection to who's living next door. Walk down the street, say, oh, do you see a villager? How is it going? What have you been up to? Anything. So really community-based involvement.
And well, when you talk about Lai Chi-Wun, well, yourself, if one looks at your own biography, well, let's say for instance, you grew up there. Actually, your mother was born there.
Correct.
So tell us about those days when you were a child and the transformations that the area has been going through.
Okay. When I was a kid, I have some few memories that I always remember. For example, is like playing on the road when there was no cars. You just go on the road, you play badminton on the road, or you play the 1, 2, 3 traffic light. So you 1, 2, 3, you stop, and you have to look around. But everybody knows you're completely safe on the road because there's no cars.
That's not the case anymore, right?
Not the case anymore. Every weekend, it will be traffic jam, finding parking space, tourists coming in, looking at the places.
So more and more people are curious about what's going on there, sneaking in and taking a look at what's all about, right? Is it
correct?
Is it really happening?
It is slowly building up, actually. There is more of an effect and awareness of this place actually exists. When you're starting to see people actually with professional cameras coming in, with drones, taking photo of the place. When I was a kid, this never happened. It's just me and the neighbor's kids playing around, hide and seek, all those games, trying to hunt the insects. So.
And when they go there, are they looking for the abandoned shipyards? Or like, do you see, because it's been, as I was saying, making headlines on the news, do you see any sort of impact?
Well, from my morning routine, walking out, sometimes I actually hear the visitors talking about, so these are the shipyards that's always been in the news. But depends of different groups. If you're big groups, they'll look at the shipyard. Smaller groups, especially the ladies that likes farming and stuff like that, they'll see, oh, this is a jackfruit tree. They'll talk about the trees, the vegetations. And for the younger crowd, they may go for, oh, where's the coffee place?
Oh yes, there's a very famous coffee place.
So each different group will have a different experience in the location.
Now, talking about the core of our talk, which is the abandoned shipyards. Before looking into the situation as we speak, I'd like you to, again, go back to your memories when you were a child, or the stories that you've heard. These shipyards have been over there laying down abandoned for a number of years, but do you remember them active?
Oh, yeah.
Have you got any vivid memories of that?
As a kid, the number one advice my mother gave me and daily, don't go play in the shipyard. It's very dangerous because it's still working shipyard. They have nails everywhere, and you always have the saw sound, the zzz sound, and the smell of cutting wood. that is vivid in your memory. And I still remember one time there was a fire in the village at nighttime. Everybody was freaking out because it was a really big thing. But everybody go and help the guys, like waking up all the neighbors. Oh, there's danger, you have to wake up, everything. So it's really cohesive, the community.
So for a number of years, and most of these plots have been left out in the dark and been posing, some of them, some safety concerns, right? And you've been voicing out some of those concerns because you live next to it, a stone's throw away from some of this more precarious, I would say, plots, right? How's the situation now?
Well, as you may know, some of the shipyards has been demolished, and those ones...
Two, right?
Two, with 3 structures, and then those one has been posing a real safety issue. You can see things falling off, the sheet metals, the beams cracking. But right now, what we're seeing is because of the demolition work, there is some industrial waste has been uncovered underneath it, like fiberglass. And as you know, fiberglass is very dangerous if you inhale it. So there's packets underneath the earth. They dig it up because of the deconstruction. So there's more, you see more visible everywhere. They're floating everywhere now.
So, of course, there are obvious safety concerns, but you've also been looking into the case for conservation.
Of course.
What's your take on this?
Conservation, I believe it represents a way of living, because it's hard to find right now that you see big apartment buildings. No, you rarely know who's living next to you. But in a very flat zone like Juan, everybody knows everybody. Everybody's very close. You know who's getting married next door because they will do their thing and they'll invite you, say hi. And in a big apartment buildings, you don't know what goes on upstairs, just right on top of you or right underneath your feet. It's a very different idea.
So, of course, it's a twofold thing, I would say, right? The need to preserve the way of life of the village and of the villagers. And on the other hand, the case for conservation and restoration of the shipyards. This would go hand in hand, but wouldn't there be a need for a balancing act so one would not jeopardize the other? My point is that if you end up having a tourist attraction, what about, of course, which would bring in benefits, but what about the other side of the equation?
I've been actually talking to the villagers, hearing them what they have to say to me.
What can you share with us?
They prefer it's not done in a mass tourism way, but individual coming in, actually experiencing place, leisurely pace, and it's for the people to relax, not like a high pressure zone. I have big buses here dropping out because they are afraid of standard litter, garbage, theft, all the things that comes with mass tourism. They are very happy to have tourists come because they chat with them sometimes. Hey, where are you from? Taiwan. Oh, cool. Talk about the fruits, jackfruits and stuff. And the preservation of the shipyard are vital because it brings attraction. But at the same time, it can be done in a way that is beneficial for the villager and the local scenery to add a new attraction and a new significant to Macau, new dimension for traveling.
So now that the government is conducting this assessment, if you are to give a piece of advice, or I would say that you would have plenty to say to the authorities, what would you single out?
I will single out, give it historical narration. That would be a very good way of looking at it. How this is part of Macau and a way of living that we actually all share, the older generation. Everything is done by hand. You feel, you know, why is this brick crooked? Because that day the wind went that way. So simple, a continuity of Macau's development.
And you're very pretty familiar with the whole area. How much of it is likely and would make sense to redevelop into this kind of tourist attraction? What sort of, I mean, when you are preserving and rebuilding, there's always this debate on, how far should you go, so you don't end up tarnishing the original intent, right?
What I would say, not give a percentage, is more of the spirituality or the space of the location. You still want to feel that you're entering a different zone. How you achieve it could be using the same material, same form structure, all those technical manners.
And looking at the management of the local authorities over the controversy, what would you have to tell us? I mean, what would you like to say about the government's approach to the controversy, to both issues related to public safety and now this move to put a halt, at least for 1 year, on the demolition works to carry out the assessment?
Well, as we are on TV, I'll say it makes a really good drama. But on a more local villagers out there, the villagers are always afraid of the government.
Why is that?
It's always been, they are afraid of government, number one, and they always want the care of the government. So it's very paradoxical. I think it boils down is to the lack of public trust in the government and how they manage. If you're doing flip-flopping, like you do want to do this, next week you tell me this, something else, it doesn't build trust, to say the least. But what it actually, unintended consequences is to start a public debate, which is actually really beneficial to the idea, because you're bringing things out to the public and everybody knows about it, and villagers start talking more outspoken. That, I'm very happy about that.
And they have to handle and to deal with different government departments because, of course, you have the Cultural Affairs Bureau, but the demolition work was carried out by the Marine and Water Bureau, and also the Public Works Bureau would also be involved. But they are under different portfolios, and sometimes it may sound like they're not saying exactly the same thing. Is that the sort of feeling that you've got as well?
Yes, there is a couple reasons for that. For my understanding is, as you're saying, the preservation and everything. Because that plot of land is actually under different jurisdictions. That's why it's very complicated. The one on the shipyard side, my understanding is, belongs to the Maritimes. The moment you cross the same road toward the mountain, it belongs to a land bureau. So it's really, if you're talking about, they really need cooperation in between. But normally, most people won't pay so much attention, and you're not aware of that. So from the outside, you feel the government saying one thing and doing another. But at the same time, they're actually doing what the government said they will do, that department said they will do. But from the outside, if you're just reading the news, you're unaware of it. So you feel like you're losing the confidence in the public. Everybody here, why are they doing that? But you don't know the story behind. That's why.
As a representative of the association, actually, you're president of the Lachibun Villagers Association. Have you had meetings with the authorities, and how have they been approaching you and the other villagers with regards to dialogue, collecting your views, making sort of field work so they can get a glimpse of what people over there are anxious about?
All right. There is no organized, like a specific forum for that issue, like any government department organized. Let's sit down and have a talk. That hasn't happened yet. But there is always I think a couple months, they have the Islanders Affair Bureau. They will invite everybody to go voice their opinion. But there's never been a specific, this is the Leji situation. What do you have to say about it? There's, of course, informal contact. If they're passing by, say, hey, how's it going? Because they're talking to people. And then they'll tell you what's happening, or they'll tell you we're still in the process of doing something. So nothing formal yet.
On the other hand, you have the civil society and people who are not living in Lachibun, or are not even based in Koloan, but they're concerned, and they're playing a role, they're talking to the media, and even some foreign experts. For instance, a few weeks ago, we had here Marco Imperadore from Milan, Italy, and he's been lately looking into the situation and putting forth some suggestions. And you've been talking to Professor Imperadore.
Yes, correct.
What have you learned from his views? What have you shared with him?
I can tell you a story and the reaction for that. There's villagers that used to work in the shipyard, and they quit their job a long time ago. But the moment when the professor was doing the presentation, I can see in their eye the brightness and the happiness is like, this can actually be done that way. And they actually feel proud, a sense of ownership, what they can see in the future. And professor took a photo way back. There was a young man in the photo. Now he's a slightly older man, but he was so proud that he was like muscular, doing all the construction work for the shipyard, but he doesn't have any photograph of himself doing that work. But because of third-party interest, he managed to see himself in a different light. So that is very important, to have more informed and caring attention from the outside world to the village.
Several ideas have been floated with regards to what to do with the abandoned shipyard zone. Professor Marco Imperadore has been talking about it. The tourism office, also the cultural bureau, experts. Let's say, for instance, to revive the area with a shipbuilding museum, showcasing boat building tools, machinery, as exhibits, or even having some ships being built there, and then there would be the tourist attraction. It's just to witness and to learn and to even perhaps join and learn the ways of shipbuilding. Would you agree with that?
First one to sign up to help out on building shipyards, because it will be building ships in the shipyards, because it will be really, really, you're experiencing a work and you're experiencing a form of tourism. Because I have been traveled, I have been to places where it's not a tourist place, but it's a village, and they just want to come and try to knit the net. I was like, okay, why not? And those are serendipity, things that you pass by, you were not expect to have, and suddenly, bam, you learn a new skill. That is something that is worth happening.
So that would be experiencing Macau in the sense of experiencing old Macau, literally, right?
Of course, priceless.
Do you see the villagers willing to welcome this kind of move or situation? Or
the villagers is always bring back, if it is government and operation, the villagers always say, I'm always supporting the government, because there have been conditioned so many years to do that, because they feel that they don't have a voice all the time. But at the same time, all of them are highly skilled, because of the way of life. They need to learn how to do concrete, how to make wood, how to do bricks, even sanitation and sewage. They have to think all these things. In an apartment building, currently, nobody would know how the functioning of the places.
Are there still any ownership, land ownership matters playing a role here?
Oh, absolutely. That one.
What's the situation now?
Oh, that is extremely complicated, and each plot is completely different. So I cannot tell you much about that.
But do you see that as an obstacle for redevelopment plan?
Obstacle and opportunity. It depends. Can we find a solution which everybody will be happy? Because there's always a win-win situation into these kind of matters.
What about infrastructure development? If the area is turned into a tourist attraction, you only have a coffee shop, right? And you may need additional, at least some sort of infrastructure, right?
Yes.
To support that kind of picture.
Of course, of course.
Do you see room for that or any risk?
I think there is a way to keep it what it, because right now what is good is exactly there is only one coffee shop. That's what's driving people there because everything feels. But you can build invisible infrastructure that will work like sewage, sanitation, everything is done, things are kept clean, but you can still keep the feeling, or you can still keep the feeling of what's is there, because it's actually a journey. The coffee shop, you have to walk all the way through this to reach the coffee shop. Sometimes morning I hear it to go, are we at the coffee shop yet? Not yet, we still work a little bit forward. Have we passed it? We don't know. So it's kind of exploration. That makes it interesting.
And you've been involved in this interesting project, which is you've been building a little free library.
Correct.
To promote literacy and raise awareness about Lai Chi Wun. Tell us about it.
Yes. It brings back to one day I was chatting with the villagers, because normally I talk to them in Cantonese, colloquially, so you don't go very deep into what's happening. But one day I was keep thinking, why do they fear the government so much? What is the reason behind it? And it turns out most of their literal education level extremely, extremely low. So meaning, I was like, that's why all their information is hearsay from hearsay. So they are never have concrete facts. And when the government is doing flip-flopping, they're reading newspaper, they don't know what to do. That's why they don't have a basis to build their opinion on. And I was like, well, what can I do? As a person that loves to read, I was like, well, why not have a library? The library in Kolowan is a bit far, you have to walk in a small one, but having a little free library for a community and get them to buy in. And I asked to design it, I asked every day the village, what color would you like? How would you like to do this? It was really...
Is it halfway through? I mean,
Oh, yeah. Now we're in the finalizing. I still need to do the base. And there's a lot of skills I don't know personally. So I need to go ask the villagers, because somebody would know how to do the ceiling. Somebody know how to do the foundation, because each family has their own specific skill. So I have to go ask them, and when they're free, they'll teach me 1 or 2 skills. But in time, okay, maybe wait until you finish, come back next week. So it's a very slow process. But right now we have a form. I'm putting out the sheet metals, so it will be part of the village, BOB community.
what will people find there?
Books.
Sure.
Yeah.
What kind of books?
And you feel free to put a book in and take a book out, whatever you feel like. So the tourists can come in and put their books. Sometimes they're waiting for the coffee shop, they can read something, so it will build a sense of community. And I want to legitimize the structure of a wooden house, because there's always a negative connotation in Macau, generally, that if you have a wooden house, that means you are below a social economical stratus. I don't believe that. I think it's a style of living and a stylistic choice, and why you want to live in this kind of housing versus a concrete tall building.
You were saying just now that each one of these families, well, they've got their own skills. This leads me to the question of the new generations. Are they still living there? Are they still growing up there? And more importantly, is this knowledge, especially directly or indirectly related to shipbuilding, the shipyard, still being passed on to the new generations, or is there a risk of the whole thing basically vanishing in 10 to 20 years?
There is absolutely a risk. There is no organized method of passing along the trade. For example, there is a lot of specialized terminology. Only they would know. For example, I will say this is a boat. There's bottom and side and the top. That's not true. Every single part has their own technical wording in Cantonese, which nobody has a book to describe. So those are being lost.
That would be a case for documenting that in the form of books or even documentaries? Or?
That will be, and that is partially, and the skill level. The kids here, most of the time, they're transferring the shipbuilding ones to house repair right now. But there is, in between, if the kids are here on holiday, they will learn it. But there is no like a community thing that there is a free workshop, every go learn this skill for this week. So it's not organized.
But when they grow up, when they want to go to work for the casinos or government or, I don't know, elsewhere outside Lai Chi Woon or even outside Koloan?
There is no need for that skill. It's not in demand locally. But of course, you can learn this and apply if you want to travel the world. You can apply these skills somewhere else. And there is, let's say, Vietnam has it, Myanmar has it. I have seen similar skills set over there. So there's always a possibility getting a job using these kind of skills. But as it stands right now, these skills are at risk of being lost in time.
Before we wrap up our talk, I'd like you to talk a bit more about Koloan, not only the Lai Chi Woon area, but the surrounding area. Because there's mounting pressure with regards to urban development. It's encroaching, it's encircling the Koloan island. How worried are you about that?
Every day I wake up, I see the big tall buildings. When I was there, every day I wake up, I saw big tall trees. So that is really the marching of the big buildings toward an idyllic village. Am I concerned? Yes, there is property development that's right next to the place, but it's kept on hold right now. There's legal issue, land right issue. All these things are happening. I hope that in terms of preserving the shipyard, everybody can think in a way that is benefit to everybody. You create a sense of space, something that is inspirational for Macau, that everybody, your friends come in, you want to show them this is what we can do as a community, as a whole Macau. This place is how we used to live, is a lifestyle we choose, and please be inspired by it.
And now one last question. Are you hopeful that this ongoing assessment, which is being carried out by the Cultural Affairs Bureau, will end up being a necessary and sufficient condition to preserve the way of life, to preserve Lai Chi Woon, and even to pave the way for redevelopment which would stick to the original spirit of the old Lai Chi Woon situation?
I think it will be a really positive move toward the direction that I and most villagers would like to see. They would like to stay there, remain there, and continue their way of life.
And you believe that that would be the outcome of the whole process?
If the process is there, has been listed at Heritage Site, yes, I believe it will actually be beneficial to everybody.
And then we'll wait and see what happens and what would lie ahead, what sort of plans, and we can discuss that some next time. Thank you very much, David Marques, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
And to you at home, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.